Dana White is facing 3 UFC controversies that all hit at once, and right now, he looks like a guy trying to plug holes in a sinking boat with his bare hands. Because right now, his stars are hurt, his contenders are pissed, and the fighter pay conversation, the one the UFC has spent years trying to smother, is back in everyone's face louder than ever.
There's crazy shit with making every card in this business. It's like a soap opera here every day.
And the thing that lit the fuse, it wasn't even an MMA fight. It was Conor Benn, a British boxer, not one of Dana's UFC champions, not one of the guys who helped build the company, not one of the guys taking elbows in the cage for years. He got $15 million for one fight under Zuffa Boxing, bankrolled by Turki Al-Sheikh and his Sella entertainment operation out of Saudi Arabia. The same money machine that's been reshaping boxing purses across the sport. That number landed like a grenade, because once that got out, every UFC fighter with a pulse did the same math at the same time. Tom Aspinall's purse became part of the conversation. Michael Page started openly sounding disgusted. Sean O'Malley chimed in, and suddenly the gap didn't just look bad, it looked humiliating.
I feel like everyone's trying to get me in trouble here.
That's the real issue. Nobody is mad that Conor Benn got paid. Good for him. Take the bag. The problem is what that number says about everyone else. It says a boxer walking through the side door can get treated like royalty, while champions in the UFC, the promotion Dana built his whole public identity on, still have to act grateful for scraps with a bonus attached. And Michael Page pretty much said it straight. Seeing Dana value outsiders that highly, while the guys inside the machine keep hearing the same recycled lines, is upsetting, disappointing.
But then to see how highly he values people away from the sport that kind of built his reputation, it's just upsetting, to be fair. It's disappointing more than anything.
Because this isn't just about greed, it's about disrespect. Then Dana did what Dana always does when the heat gets too close to the source. He reframed it. At the post-fight press conference for Zuffa Boxing 4 this past Saturday, he went with the usual move. Why is it a bad thing? Because nobody said it was bad that Ben got paid. That was never the accusation. The accusation is that Dana just exposed the pay gap himself in public with a flamethrower. You can't hand one guy $15 million for one night and then expect UFC fighters not to look around like, hold on, what exactly have we been doing here all these years? That's what makes his response feel slippery. He didn't address the comparison, he dodged it cleanly, took the conversation somewhere safer. And the timing could not be worse because the UFC just landed a monster television deal, $7.7 billion with Paramount. They also settled that antitrust lawsuit for $375 million. Bonus money got bumped up, 50 grand to 100 grand. New finish bonuses too, but next to 15 million for Ben, it looks tiny, cosmetic, like throwing extra chips on the table and hoping nobody notices who owns the casino. Eddie Hearn naturally saw blood in the water and started twisting the knife, and honestly, he didn't even need to embellish much. If you're a UFC fighter and you see Zuffa throwing that kind of money at a boxer, of course you're going to think the same thing. What the hell am I being paid for exactly? Why am I generating millions and getting a fraction back? That's why Tom Aspinall signing with Matchroom Talent Agency mattered. It wasn't just a management move, it felt like a signal, a warning shot. Fighters are looking around now. Quietly, maybe cautiously, but they're looking. Sean O'Malley gave the other side of it. The side people don't always say out loud. The fear. He basically admitted what a lot of fighters already understand. You do not want to end up on Dana's bad side. You don't want the matchmaker energy around your name to change. You don't want your opportunities getting weird for reasons nobody will say directly. That one quote told you everything about the power structure. That's the UFC model in miniature. Everybody knows the rules, but half the rules are unwritten. Stay useful, stay agreeable, don't embarrass the boss, don't get too independent, don't start acting like your value belongs to you. And now, that same atmosphere hangs over the Jon Jones mess, which might be the clearest example yet of Dana trying to retell a story after it already happened in public. Because for months, Jon Jones was orbiting the White House card. The chatter was everywhere. Jones himself was posting. Fans were building theories. Media was running with it. It felt real because from the outside, it looked real. Then Dana came out and slammed the door like none of it ever existed. At the UFC 326 post-fight press conference on March 8th, he said Jon Jones was never even remotely in his mind.
No, it's not.
Was Jon
Ever. Jon Jones he retired because of his hips. He's got arthritis in his hips. He should have hip replacement.
I have severe arthritis, and most people don't know that. My left hip is covered in arthritis.
That explanation is weak. Worse than weak, actually. It feels convenient. Because Jones didn't react like a guy who made the whole thing up in his head. He reacted like somebody who thought discussions were happening. Discussions that would typically run through Hunter Campbell, the UFC's chief business officer, and the guy who handles the big money fighter contracts, and then got blindsided. Before deleting the posts, he was going nuclear online. I'm released from the UFC? Make this make sense. So all of this negotiating was complete bullshit? That doesn't sound like fantasy. That sounds like a negotiation that went sideways. And Jon Jones is many things, but he's not some random featherweight tweeting for attention. He's one of the biggest names the sport has ever had. If he thought he was in talks, chances are he was in talks.
I'm so pissed off.
So now you've got two versions of the same story. Jones acting like he got cut out after real discussions. Dana acting like the whole thing was fan fiction and the media just got carried away. You can pick whichever version you want, but Dana's version asks you to ignore way too much. It asks you to believe this was never serious, even though everyone around it was behaving like it was serious. And the flag football line, please. That felt like Dana grabbing the first usable excuse off the floor. Jon looked sluggish in a casual clip. Therefore, he was never going to fight on the biggest card imaginable. That's not an explanation. That's cleanup. The more likely version is simpler and uglier. Jones wanted Jones money, real money, White House card money, legacy event money, and neither Dana nor Hunter Campbell wanted to do that deal. So now the story has to be rewritten after the fact, so nobody inside the company looks cheap or powerless. Classic UFC politics. If the fight doesn't happen, somebody has to own the narrative. Dana makes sure it's him. And look at the card they ended up with for UFC Freedom 250 on June 14. Ilia Topuria versus Justin Gaethje for the undisputed lightweight title. Alex Pereira versus Cyril Gane for an interim heavyweight belt. Sean O'Malley versus Amin Zahabi. Mauricio Ruffy versus Michael Chandler. Bo Nickel versus Kyle Daukaus. Diego Lopez versus Steve Garcia. Good card, big names, crowd-pleasing fights. Still feels like something's missing. Because if you're putting on a White House event, the White House of all places, the whole thing begs for a myth-level star, somebody bigger than the matchup itself. Jones was the obvious answer, even with all the baggage, especially with all the baggage. That's what made it feel historic. Instead, you've got Pereira moving up to fight for an interim belt, while Tom Aspinall, the actual heavyweight champion, is sidelined with an eye injury. That's not clean, that's not elegant, that's a patch job. The event itself is bizarre in a way only modern combat sports can be bizarre. TKO's Mark Shapiro said they aren't even really expecting a profit. Production cost around $60 million. They hope to claw back maybe half through sponsors and partnerships. Around 1,000 seats set aside for military members, tiny attendance. Federal property, self-regulation. Read that again. Self-regulation on federal property. No Nevada State Athletic Commission. No state oversight at all. The UFC policing itself on the grounds of the White House. That sentence alone sounds made up. And inside that same storm, you've got Islam Makhachev dealing with hand issues.
I don't know. He's got some hand issues. I know that. I don't know how serious the hand issues are or how long that will keep him out, but yeah, he's injured.
Dana said he has a partial ligament tear after the Jack Della Maddalena fight at UFC 322 in November, when Islam moved up and grabbed the welterweight title. So now another potential blockbuster option for the White House card is sitting on ice. Topuria, of course, wasn't buying it. He went straight to social media and basically said Islam always has an excuse, and this time the excuse is injury. That's a nasty accusation, but it also tells you how tense everything is at the top right now. Nobody trusts the timing. Nobody trusts the explanations. Every injury announcement feels like it gets filtered through suspicion immediately. And that brings us to Arman Tsarukyan, which might be the most revealing case of all because it shows exactly how the UFC treats fighters who drift outside the lines. On paper, Tsarukyan should be in the mix. Number 2 ranked lightweight contender, elite skill set, legitimate claim to a title shot. Reality, he's in the freezer. Dana even said it in that very Dana way.
I don't know. I'm not thrilled with Arman right now.
That phrase tells you everything. It means the punishment isn't only about rankings or results. It's personal, internal, vibe-based, relationship-based, the kind of thing fighters can feel but can't really challenge. And yes, Tsarukyan has given them material. He punched a fan at UFC 300, got fined $25,000 and hit with a 9-month ban. He headbutted Dan Hooker at weigh-ins in Qatar. Then came the Real American Freestyle Brawl in Tempe on February 28th. Where he beat Giorgio Poulos in a grappling match and ended up in the middle of a post-fight melee that looked completely out of control.
You gotta get a takedown, right? Oh my God, trying to antagonize. I would just beat that Is that it? Oh my gosh, man. We didn't know what to expect, but I know we did not expect this. Poulos looks for the takedown. Tsarukyan stuffs it. And this match is over. Arman Tsarukyan is now.
So from the UFC side, the file on him is obvious. Talented, volatile, unreliable, headache. From Tsarukyan's side, it probably looks different. He's dangerous enough to matter, high enough in the rankings to deserve something, and still getting leapfrogged because the boss doesn't like the energy around his name. That's why the title picture feels political. He gets passed over. Gaethje gets the spot against Topuria for the undisputed lightweight title. Arman was already supposed to fight Makhachev at UFC 311 and then withdrew with a back injury the day before. Maybe that was legitimate. Maybe the timing poisoned trust. Either way, his standing cratered. Yet, he hasn't exactly gone quiet. He keeps fighting outside the UFC bubble. Rematch with Poulos at RAF 7 in Tampa on March 28th. Grappling match with Muhammad Makhachev at Hype Brazil in Rio on March 11th. He's staying visible, staying active, not waiting around for forgiveness. That part matters too because the UFC likes control more than chaos, and Tsarukyan feels like chaos. Skilled chaos, but chaos all the same. When asked about Topuria versus Gaethje, he didn't play diplomat. He said it's a good fight. But Gaethje has no chance, and Ilia probably knocks him out. That's not the language of a guy who thinks he's beneath that level. That's the language of a guy who thinks he should be there and knows he isn't there for reasons that have very little to do with merit. And once you zoom out, that's what ties all three controversies together. The pay issue, the Jones issue, the Tsarukyan issue, control. That's the through line. The UFC has always sold itself as a meritocracy wrapped in violence. Best fight the best. Champions prove it in the cage. Rankings matter. Greatness rises. That's the public version. The private version is messier. Money matters. Optics matter. Loyalty matters. Timing matters. Whether Dana likes how you move matters. Demetrious Johnson cut right through the noise when he reacted to the Benn purse. 15 million for one fight. Is Khamzat making that? Is Ilia making that? Is Merab making that? We don't know because the numbers stay hidden. But it sure looked like a flex. Exactly. Dana wanted to show the world that he could play in boxing too, that he could hand out a giant check backed by Saudi money and look like a kingmaker in another lane. Instead, he accidentally held up a giant spotlight over the one issue his own roster never stops thinking about. How much are we actually worth to this company? That's why this moment feels different, not because fighters have never complained before, they have. For years, quietly, then loudly, then quietly again, but now the contradictions are harder to hide. The UFC wants the valuation of a major sports league, the prestige of a national institution, the headlines of a global entertainment brand. It still wants the labor cost discipline of a much smaller operation. That gap is where all the tension lives, and now it's spilling out everywhere. Through managers, through deleted tweets, through side comments in interviews, through angry social posts, through guys reading a $15 million boxing purse and realizing in real time how the hierarchy actually works. The White House card should have been a coronation, a victory lap, a giant symbol of how far the UFC has come. Instead, it feels like an expensive spectacle hanging over a pile of unresolved resentment. Maybe Dana smooths it over. He's done that before. Maybe the new TV money changes the pay structure enough to cool things down. Maybe Jones stays gone. Maybe Tsarukyan gets back in line. Maybe the machine absorbs all of this and keeps moving like it always does. But the tone has changed. You can feel it. Fighters are less scared to say what they really think. Fans are less willing to buy every explanation. Rival promoters are more than happy to jab at the wound. And every time Dana tries to brush something off, the pushback gets louder. That's the part he can't fully control anymore, not like before. And that might be the biggest story here. Bigger than Benn, bigger than Jones, bigger than Tsarukyan. For the first time in a long time, Dana White still has the microphone, but he doesn't fully own the room.